Hello, this is Rashida Dukes again for another recipe, and today we're making another chocolate cake because I love chocolate cake. There is a little story about this cake. I saw it in Williams Sonoma catalog during Christmas time, and I fell in love with it because it looks glorious. It has many layers. I believe I counted around 18 layers. And there was hardly any description. All I can read is chocolate ganache layer, chocolate cake, and then hazelnut buttercream. I believe hazelnut praline buttercream. That's all I get from the description. So I made my own version, and this is what I came up with. You'll be impressing everybody when you make a cake like this one. The first layer is made from the feuilletine, melted chocolate, and hazelnut praline. Just give it a nice foundation, and also give it a beautiful crunch. It's really unique crunch, and you will have the link for everything I'm making, for the measurements, for everything. The second layer is a flourless chocolate sponge cake. So there is no flour, so it's a gluten-free cake. It just happened that way. And then the third layer is going to be the hazelnut praline buttercream. And then after that, you add the chocolate cake, then the buttercream, chocolate cake, buttercream. There's only two different flavors in this cake, in most of the cake, except the first layer, which is crunchy. And then the last layer is going to be just plain chocolate ganache. You can add the mirrored chocolate glaze, but I just prefer to use for this one chocolate ganache, and around it on the side also the chocolate ganache. Then I can stick the chopped hazelnut, toasted hazelnut around the cake. I was planning to make 18 layers, but I end up making 25. Get the buttercream out of the freezer or the refrigerator. Using a mixer, add the hazelnut praline. All the details for the measurement, for the ingredient, for everything are in the description of this video, so please check them out. I'm making a crunchy layer for the first one. So for that, I'm using feuilletine. I'm breaking them down into small pieces. Then I'm adding the hazelnuts praline spread plus the melted chocolate. Get the chocolate sponge cake out of the freezer. I'm using my famous wooden frame. They're 8" by 8". So the cake is going to be 8 by 8. Trim the edges because normally they are crispy. Then pour the feuilletine mixture on the top of the sponge cake. The thickness of the feuilletine mixture is going to be around 1/8 inch, 3 mm. Place the whole thing on a thick plastic sheet, then put it on the top of a baking sheet or a cookie sheet and leave it in the freezer for a few minutes. Get the cake out of the freezer, flip it so the crunchy layer is at the bottom. Put a frame around it if you're using one. It's optional, of course. Then whip your buttercream. By the way, the color of the buttercream is quite light because I did not add a lot of hazelnuts praline spread. Then we're going to have a layer of 1/8 inch. Put it in the freezer. That is optional. So far we have 3 layers. Now we're adding the layer number 4. Then we're going to add the layer number 5. And we're going to continue doing the same thing between the chocolate sponge cake and the buttercream. For this recipe, I multiply the buttercream recipe by 4, the sponge cake by 4. This way I can get 10 layers from each one of them. But you don't have to. By the time I reach layer number 6, I had to stop because the cake cutter I'm going to use is 8-inch diameter, is perfect, but the height is only 2 inches or 3 inches high. Luckily I have this giant cookie cutter, but normally you may use what we call a tart ring or a cake frame. This is the second part of the cake. We're going to continue building it by putting the sponge cake, buttercream, sponge cake, buttercream, until we get to 6 to 8 layers. I would recommend to not go beyond 8 layers because trimming the cake will be very difficult. So by the end we have 3 cakes. Each one of them has between 6 to 8 layers. We place the cake with the crunchy bottom first. Then we add a thin layer of buttercream. Then we place the second cake on the top of it. And we may store this cake in the refrigerator or freezer for a few minutes until the whole thing is set. Now we're going to add the third cake. Make sure that your cake is secure. You may store it in the refrigerator for a few minutes before proceeding to the next step. Add the third cake and stack them all together. Make sure they're all even. You may use what we call acetate plastic. It's not necessary, it's optional. It helps to keep the cake together. And you may even add what we call a cake ring. I have a deep one. If you do, please use it. Apply a light pressure to help the cake to stack evenly. We're almost done. Warm the chocolate ganache until it's pourable. We're going to use it for our last layer. Get the cake out of the refrigerator or the freezer. Apply the chocolate ganache on the top and then on the side. Toast the hazelnuts and chop them. Make sure they are chopped very fine because when they're coarse they don't look good on the cake. get the cake out of the refrigerator, apply some heat using a regular hair dryer or a heat gun, and then apply the hazelnut on the side. Make sure they stick very well. If we get some hazelnut on the top of the cake, don't worry about it. Use a tweezer and clean it up. Then use the heat on the top to smooth out the surface. If you're not happy with the look of the last layer of the cake, you can always pour more chocolate ganache, smooth it out. You may get some of the chocolate ganache on the side. You have to be very careful. In this case, I had to protect it using the acetate plastic. And you have to be careful while removing it. You can always fix the side by adding more hazelnuts and also using your tweezer. You may have to take your time for this one, and I think it's worth it. Look at that cake. And definitely try to have some fun when you make this cake. So don't stress out. Try to follow the principle of la mise en place, where you make your buttercream, freeze it, you make your chocolate cake, you freeze it, and the day when you're building that cake, you're not making anything, you're just building it. All the links for all the ingredients I'm using, the measurement and everything, they are in the description of this video. If I miss anything, please leave me a question or comment and I'll be happy to answer them. I cannot edit the video once it's published, but I can go to my website and edit it and add what I miss. So please leave your comment, they're very important. And I hope you're having fun with this cake and hope to see you soon. Thank you.